Welcome back. The new Biden administration has an opportunity to set new precedents in contracting. The prices agencies pay and how they pay them is one possibility. Eric Lofgren's a research fellow at the Center for Government Contracting at George Mason University and writing about this issue recently. Eric, welcome back. It's good to have you back on the program. What's the biggest challenge now as the department tries to figure out what it should pay for things, the Defense Department, that is?
Sure, Francis. Yeah, the department has been basically using a very similar mechanism to determine what's a fair and reasonable price for essentially the last 100 years. So it's a very much an industrial era model. And when you think about how production was done back in those times, that seems to make sense, right? Because most of the products that were bought by the Department of Defense and in the broader economy were, physical products in nature. And so most of the value that went into the product wasn't necessarily the product design or software, of course, because they didn't have software back then, but it went into things like raw materials, right? Physical capital like machine tools, facilities, and the like, and then also assembly line labor. So when you're trying to buy a product in the industrial era, most of the cost was actually in the physical attributes of the thing that you're buying. And even for an information good like a newspaper, for example, most of the cost was actually right in the paper, in the distribution system, in the printing, and the capital that went to support that. But so the Department of Defense, of course, when it decided on how should it be justifying prices in the 50s and then the 60s with the Truth in Negotiations Act, they're really looking at what is the resource input cost into this object. And then you can add maybe a 10, 15% profit on top of that, and that's a fair and reasonable price. And one of the issues was over time since the 50s, the sources of value being generated in the economy has changed. So when you look at, for example, software, data, or even product designs and other types of intangible assets, those can essentially be reproduced at zero marginal cost, right? So when I'm reproducing software, all of the cost was actually in the front end in terms of research and development and other costs that were really expensed and not capitalized through the accounting system and the way we think about value. So if the government now is looking for, well, what's the input cost into this piece of software? Well, it was basically zero to reproduce, but what did it cost to create it is a good question. And then when we start thinking about that, we really start thinking, if we take economics seriously, it's not the input cost that defines the output, right, in terms of what's its value and what its price should be. It's almost the other way around. And the way the department probably needs to start thinking about pricing in the 21st century for information goods particularly, and you'll even start seeing for physical goods, the content of information in there growing, right? Lean manufacturing is actually an intangible asset that's not amenable to costing because you don't know exactly which end product. It's an organizational capability. You don't know what end product, you can't trace a specific cost to an output. 3D printing is another one. So as the information content, even of physical goods, increases, we need to start thinking about the opportunity cost, the cost of alternatives, rather than the input costs. How much labor, material, and the like it took.
Eric, you've got 4 recommendations that you write in this piece, and we're not going to have time to talk about all 4 of them. Commercial solutions openings, consumption-based solutions, mission or capability-based requirements, and budget line item consolidation. Tell me about budget line item consolidation, because the way that the money flows strikes me as maybe the most important of all of these.
Yeah, that tends to be one of the things that I think is incredibly important too, but it actually supports the rest of those recommendations. And so budget line item consolidation is when you basically take these quite low level managed program elements and kind of consolidate them to provide more flexibility to the Department of Defense so it doesn't have to pre-specify exactly what is needed. And that's kind of a difference from the industrial to the information age in terms of back in the industrial era, you had more commodity-like products that you could pre-specify, you knew what it was, as opposed to today where if you're looking at, for example, cloud between Azure and AWS, these are actually differentiated products. So they have differentiated offerings and differentiated pricing strategies. And to the extent that the department has to line up this money to a very specific thing years in advance, that doesn't lend itself to this kind of, more information era processes that provide the flexibility to do something new, to create competitors, and then derive value through the competitive ecosystem that is provided.
Eric Lofgren, thanks very much for joining me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.